how have you managed to pick yourself up every day and get yourself back into work mode, find new clients?
Structure equals discipline.
And then what you see is all of a sudden the company is not loyal to you.
So sometimes you need to be aware, either have this side project that you're building that might one day tip over, or make yourself extremely valuable, be aware of your options within the sector, regularly test the market. I would say every 18 months, interview for somewhere else, see what you might be worth,
what you might have needed to earn compared to your salary to actually step away.
When your side hustle gets to 40% recurring revenue on a monthly basis for around 6 months.
But you're still nervous anyway. Do you believe that there are some people out there who are just not suited to doing this themselves, like going and starting their own business?
Absolutely. I mean, how many people have you worked with? You're like, I wouldn't trust you to...
They're not ambitious minds, that's for sure. Colin, welcome back for episode 2.
It's a pleasure to be on for round 2. Really enjoyed round 1, so much so that I released it on my own podcast, which was really cool.
And I appreciate you doing that as well, because it's also driven some traffic towards my podcast, which is nice. I think we've probably got a bit of a similar audience in terms of like the personal development and the growth and that sort of stuff.
Ambitious minds, literally exactly that.
Exactly that. Anyway, what's been happening since we last spoke? I know you've had a big change recently in your life.
Definitely the biggest change that could have possibly happened, because I think how we spend our time and how we make our money and what we put our energy and our focus into is so important. And the last episode we spoke a lot about my sales career and everything that I was doing in that space, and of course we spoke about building Cambro Conversations and what came from that. But in July this year, my employer, where I'd been for 4 years and had a sales directorship and I'd done really well within, both on a personal level and both for the business, went into administration quite unexpectedly. I say unexpectedly, there were a few warning signs and we'll definitely talk about those as we go. But anyone that listened to the last episode would have known that I was building the parachute for a very long time with the idea and plan to become self-employed as a sales coach and consultant sitting alongside the podcast. It just happened far sooner than planned. And I think when these curveballs come up, as we'll definitely get into in today's chat, you just have to be as ready as possible, physically, mentally, financially, and dare I say it, spiritually, to be ready for these types of situations to unfold. I had a tiny bit of prior experience. In 2019. I'd moved from, again, taking a bit of a leap of faith to move industry into a different part of the insurance world, and the business had been bought by an American hedge fund, and 12 weeks in they made everyone redundant. But that business was highly profitable, so we all got really good payouts. I landed on my feet, ended up working for Marsh & McLellan, the world's biggest insurance broker, so I was pretty happy. This time round, a load of factors at play, but a business that turns over £50 million, and then the creditors reports just come out yesterday and it had £41 million owed.
Wow.
That is a shit show. Despite a division that I ran doing £4 million turnover at a 47% margin.
Wow.
What on earth are we up to? So yeah, huge changes. I've now gone all in with the sales coaching consulting. Cambro Conversations remains a weekly podcast, which I put my heart and my soul into. And that's why I'm down in London producing as well.
Just going back to when you were employed, what were they saying about you doing the coaching on the side? Because we've been working together, for example, for a while when you were doing that whilst you were employed. But this is all part of that building for what comes next. And I'm guessing that there was always a point that you wanted to get to where you can say, now I've got the parachute, I can also just sort of jump out and I'm going to be fine. But were they saying anything when you were working about you doing this on the side?
That's a really good question, because I think many people listening who have a side hustle will sometimes have that friction point with their employer. For me, working in sales, I'd been brought into that business in 2021 purely with the focus of growing a division that had one singular big customer to many other customers. So that one big singular customer did about £1 million worth of revenue. My job was to come in and business develop within that sector. So that sector was student accommodation. So universities, PBSA, which is purpose-built student accommodation, and HMO, which is HMO landlords that own properties that students let out. We were supplying furniture into that sector. And they had the product range, they had the service, they had the operations teams to do the installs, but they didn't have somebody to get out there in front of those universities, get out in front of those customers and make the sales happen. And that's something that I've done for a long time now across multiple different industries, and I really like doing. So when they brought me in, I was a little bit of the Democratic Republic of Colin, the only Scottish employee, online to the, like, he was called Chief Revenue Officer, but the MD. And just able to do my thing and push on. When I went in, I declared all my other interests, which I'd been doing the podcast for about 15, 16 months when I joined them. I started the podcast during lockdown, as many people know from episode 1. And so I had those interests declared. I said, I'm going to come in and deliver for you. I kept my end of the bargain. In year 1, did about 300 grand. Year 2, 850. Year 3, 1.1. Year 4, 1.7. So I went in, did my end of the bargain. Whether I did that in 40, 50, 60 hours a week or 30 or 20 hours a week was neither really here nor there. I think sales has that level of leeway where if the numbers don't lie, let Colin do his thing. A couple of management changes happened, again, around what was about to come down the line in terms of the administration. So I was online to somebody else, and he was saying to me, are you still committed to staying here despite some of the choppy waters that we're in? And I was saying, yeah, I want to deliver another million, plus again this summer and get paid the commission from that. Now, obviously that now hasn't happened, which is really disappointing. But I did say to them that maybe we would look at a phased leaving for me from November onwards, because student accommodation is very cyclical. Between July and October, I would do something like 80% of my revenue because of the students being away for the summer and then coming back for term. The furniture needed to be there. And so when that's the situation, I was honest that November 25, I was going to have a conversation with them about whether I went down to 4 days or 3 days, or whether I worked for them on a retainer basis to do a handover with a new person that I maybe helped recruit. And I was quite open about that. But prior to that, I was not telling them anything. And I actually didn't, and I'll tell you this, based off, again, a company going bust. You are in the business of you. And that's a quote from our friend Dave Lewis, our mutual friend.
Yep.
We speak about that a lot, and he speaks about that a lot with his financial advisory clients. You're in the business of you. You owe your employer almost fuck all, because they will not be there to back you when it gets choppy. 2 private equity firms milked that business for all it was worth, mismanaged it, had expensive leases, expensive loans, terrible terms with HSBC or whoever they were fucking loaning the money from. And they had vanity projects that didn't allow them to focus on the areas of the business like mine and several others which were performing really, really well, and they sunk the ship. So if that's going on in the background and you are really detached from the business owner and who potentially is running the show, you should remain in the business of you. Keep your cards close to your chest if that's helpful. But if you are somebody building a side hustle and you think it could be a way that you would consult for your employer in the future, or you would have less days and strip back, you have a choice to make whether you want to be that open. You don't have to be.
So this is really interesting, because a lot of people, when they are working for a company, they're looking for loyalty, right? They're like, I want to be loyal. I want less companies on my CV. And then what you see is all of a sudden the company is not loyal to you. As you've seen, I'm sure that I'm seeing many of my friends right now are going through the same. Redundancies are happening a lot. People are being let go. And all of a sudden, shit. And if you've not got something in the background that you're working on, then what do? Then you're panicking.
There's 2 things to that, isn't there? There's either have something that you're working on, which is potentially an off-ramp, or as I called it, a parachute, or continue to upskill yourself within your work. Make sure you're getting any qualifications that are available within your sector paid for by your employer as part of your CPD or whatever term they want to use, L&D. Ensure that you are somebody that is aware of what's open within the market as well. I won't disclose exactly who this individual is, but somebody very close to me decided to stay within a business they were in, but they got a counter offer for an over 40% increase with a direct competitor. And the conversations back and forth managed to stay where he was, didn't get the full 40%, but got a much clearer trajectory on his pathway forward.
Yeah, okay.
So sometimes you need to be aware, either have this side project that you're building that might one day tip over, or make yourself extremely valuable, be aware of your options within the sector, regularly test the market. I would say every 18 months, interview for somewhere else, see what you might be worth. If there's a discrepancy between that and your current employer, it's called leverage. I've never actually had a counter offer or accepted it. I've always declined. When I'm leaving somewhere, I've always been like, I'm gone. But if we're thinking nowadays, I think it is more prevalent to make sure you've got that kind of counterbalance of what's my market value.
Yeah. And I don't think many people know what their market value is. And I think this is what people need to go for an exercise and understand. What am I worth? Go and test the market, go out to recruiters, etc. Or go out there and see if I can put my skills to use on a consultancy basis and see what other people will pay me. Did you ever get to a point where you were saying, I've got an income coming in, which is nice, and I've got commission coming in as well, which I'm looking forward to receiving. But I know that if I can earn X amount from one client on the side, how many of those clients do I need to have per month to then replicate my salary to then step away?
Yeah, you're extremely financially prudent, as is your role, and it's funny. It's good you practice what you preach, because I think there's many different professions where they say one thing and do another. I think doctors are chief among those, actually. Interesting enough, some of my friends that are in that field in terms of their health and wellness. But this is a bit of a first world problem, but I think many of the people who listen to an Ambitious Mind podcast will appreciate this. The first time you hit six figures in the UK is a real wake up call that PAYE is not particularly friendly to you. And the tax rate between 100 and 125k is around about 62%. And not financial advice, but when you do hit that threshold, strongly consider looking at putting some of that money into your pension, which is a shame, because yes, that money is still yours in the future, but you'd rather have it now to do things with, whether that's property or other investments or even just lifestyle upgrades. So that was definitely a wake-up call for me that first year when that happened. Really proud to hit that milestone. But equally, from a PAYE perspective, really challenging, whereas everything I'm doing with the podcast and the sales coaching was in an LTD, so much more tax efficient structure.
And you can compound it as well. So like, for example, when I first crossed that barrier, I was like, I've got a big, I actually found it was a headache. What do I do right now? So do I put all of this money into my pension, but I want to buy a house in the future? So what do I do? But you know that your net result is about 38p in every pound that you earn. So
that is scandalous, though. Like, just for a second, and you will get, if we clip this and it's on TikTok, you'll get the lefties in the comments who do not understand this debate. These are normal people who've worked their way up to 100k. You've not fucked over anyone else or stumped on anyone else to get there. You've worked hard in your career, you've worked hard in your qualifications, you've applied yourself in a field that has a vehicle that's suitable to do so, and you've got to that 100k mark. You're not some sort of extraordinary person, or you're not some sort of horrible, evil, rich person that wet wipes that Gary Economics got upset about, right? You've got to that situation, and you're in a situation which is deeply unfair. 38 pence. It's not acceptable.
And if you've got a student loan, it's even worse than that.
Oh, I hadn't even considered that. Which you're told to do in order to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah. So you're taking home probably like 30p, 20 something p in every pound that you earn over 100,000, between 100 and 125. But so it becomes a headache. So as you say, if you're doing it in a limited company, you have the ability to compound that. You can put the money into the company, you can reinvest it, you can try to grow, you can try to do more, and it's a lot more tax efficient to pay yourself out of that. And obviously all of the tax benefits you've got with your mobile phone, some of your rent, your working costs, your car, and all those sorts of things. So did you actually do a calculation to work out what you might have needed to earn compared to your salary to actually step away?
There's a few different things that play here. There's a creator online called Justin Welsh from the US, and he talks about when your side hustle gets to 40% recurring revenue on a monthly basis for around 6 months, that's 40% of your salary on a monthly basis. And of course, you're using your other 40 hours for your day job. Then there's a relative level of proof of concept here that you can do this. So that was always a consideration for me. A lot of what I've been doing in my coaching has been project basis. So you and I worked on a project of 6 calls in a block and particular modules we were going to work through based on your needs and requirements. It wasn't a case of you pay me X per month for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, which would probably be an easier way to structure something if you were looking to leave a recurring salary. But I've been able to generate a lot of clients, so it's not really been that problem. I also, from a fiscal perspective, have always kept a tight control over what my mortgage is, what my car payment is. I own my car, but I pay a loan back to the bank at 4%, which I'm comfortable with. My gym membership, and then roughly what I spend on things like groceries. And then anything outside of that, you can go monk mode if you need to. If you were in that sort of situation, you cut holidays, you cut meals out, etc. So I had a really tight grasp on that. I'm a bit of a disciple or student of Andrew Craig, who's on the podcast later today, and he's been a fantastic guest on your show twice as well, where having that emergency fund there of 3 to 6 months of living expenses for those things like household, car, bills, essentials potentially for me, like a gym membership. Having that there gives you tremendous reassurance that when the storm comes, you are ready to dance in it to some extent, or at least not drown for a particular period because of how well prepared you are and set up you are, and it allows you to make choices from a place of abundance. So this redundancy period where the business went pop, I had breathing room to say I'm going to go all in rather than rush into getting another job. I was able to calmly and clearly be much more reassured.
Were you still nervous anyway?
I don't get nervous, I get excited, Jay. So they both come from the same place in the body. I learned that from a lady called Hannah Hughesman. I had her on the podcast back in 2022. Hannah's a mental performance coach in the US, and she said, my players before games, they don't get nervous, they get excited. Because it's the same sort of feeling, that kind of rush in the stomach. The only times I've been nervous, a few moments lying in bed at night when your phone's away, I've got my eye mask on, and I'm lying there waiting to go to sleep, and I'm thinking, can I make this work? I think the lack of stimulus is why those thoughts come up. I have a practice where I don't necessarily journal really religiously as much as I used to, but I have a thought dump, and I time box my next day into my diary, and I know my priorities, I know when they're happening. And it's reassuring before you go to bed to do that, because you know you're going to work in the coaching business the next day. I had 2 discovery calls. I had 2 actually delivery calls. I had a LinkedIn post that I was putting up, which was a call to action, generate more leads. I had a lead magnet I'm working on for my email list. Having that's great, but when the lights go out and you're lying there and you're thinking, that is when there's a little bit of nerves, Jay, to think, am I going to make this work? And then the next day you wake up and you just smash those doubts and you say, don't worry about that, subconscious Colin, I'm going to deal with this.
How do you motivate yourself on a daily basis? Because when you've got a job and you know that you need to turn up 9 to 5, it gives you a sense of purpose and something to turn up to. If you've just been made redundant, and there are some fears, which I'm sure some people do go through, how have you managed to pick yourself up every day and get yourself back into work mode to go out there, explore, find new clients, do exploratory calls and those sorts of things?
Structure equals discipline. I would say I'm very fortunate that I was a home worker pre it becoming popular with the C19 period. When I graduated university in 2014, I went into a graduate account manager role for Ensley Insurance, and I was field based, which meant I would go out to my different university clients, and then sometimes down south to different training things in Cheltenham and Manchester, Birmingham, etc. But I would work from my parents' house that I lived in the dining room. And so you had to build discipline. Back then, there was much less monitoring of you in the same way that there wasn't really Teams. I think we had an internal chat. I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't Slack either. We had an internal messenger service. But you had to be accountable to yourself, because again, that was a sales role where you're renewing accounts, trying to grow accounts and trying to sell to new ones. If you weren't doing your job, you would quickly get found out in your figures. So I'm fortunate that I've always had a structure of knowing that working from home, and again, I had my dad to look up to, who for my entire adult life, my entire life, 35, 36 years, he's been in business as a consultant in the quality management assurance space. So I saw him work between 8 till 12, have his lunch, and then work from 1 till 5, and then have dinner with the family, maybe go to rugby training, and then he would go back and he would do some more emails. And I had that example for me, so I knew that working for yourself is not a case of how maybe some people adapted to working at home during the C19 period, where it was a case of Jerry McKell was on in the background and they were nipping out for the occasional game of golf or something during the day. And having that structure and that practice for well over a decade in my corporate career, when it comes to working for yourself, it probably feels even better and more compelling, because everything I do now is for me, which is quite exciting. If we frame it that way, daunting otherwise. And don't get me wrong, I think I'm sure there'll be moments in the coming few months where maybe my July and August figures were amazing. I was really proud of what we managed to generate in the business with new clients and revenue and how profitable that was. But there might be a month where a workshop slides out, or a client cancels, or maybe God knows, I would come on well, because that's different in self-employment than it is from a career as well. And there'll be moments of doubt. But my mission and my promise to myself is that I'm going to make this work. And I just have to act in alignment with that, because where there's a difference between your identity and who you hold yourself as, and your habits and behaviours and routines that's sitting behind that, that's where a lot of dissatisfaction comes from. And best believe I'm not willing to be dissatisfied.
Do you believe that there are some people out there who are just not suited to doing this themselves, like going and trying their own business?
Absolutely. I mean, how many people have you worked with? You're like, I wouldn't trust you to...
Yeah, they're not ambitious minds, that's for sure.
No, and they don't listen to a podcast like this one. And equally, for 3 of the 4 years in my last role, I was extremely fulfilled as a sales director. I was growing the revenue, I was winning new customers, I was being paid well. And then when stuff went a bit sideways with them mispaying suppliers on time, or pushing different targets onto me that were different from what we were agreed based on the type of product that was available for me to sell, just silly things that were red flags that the ownership were not supporting the business in the way that they should. You also realise that you can find roles you can work in where you can be really fulfilled. I think sales is one of those. I think the type of role that you do, Jay, where it's very much J Lawrence P&L within Rathbones.
It's like a franchise,
which is really, really, it allows you a lot of ownership. I think if you were working and you were a bit of a lackey within an office where you're doing menial admin tasks or fucking around on spreadsheets, I think that's where modern man is a bit like, oh, fuck cubicle working, like I'm going to go and do something different. And I understand that. But not everyone is suitable to work for themselves. For the longest time, I probably wasn't the guy that was going to work for themselves, but I now found the vehicle to do that. And I think maybe we'll talk briefly about that. I think when you grow an audience online from 2017 onwards of many thousand people through Instagram, LinkedIn, and the podcast, there's lots of different opportunities to it's like biz ops. I could become a dropshipper, a crypto guy, a property guy, a fitness coach, which many people know I'm really into my health and my fitness. But the reason that sales coaching was the vehicle is, one, I have a genuine skill set there and a track record of producing for myself. But two, my communication skills, which I've developed over the last 4 or 5 years, allow me to label different concepts and frameworks that I use and teach on to others to ensure that they don't become the Aldi or the BTEC version of me, but they become the 2.0 version themselves. So you use my 3 Ys outbound sequence now.
And which, by the way, I'm going to also say on this podcast that I probably wasn't comfortable at first with the way that we were talking about constructing a message and the follow-up process, because it wasn't something that came naturally to me, but it's been effective. And I think this is the key point that we should dive into as well, because I think we'll cover some of the methods, but for me, it was about pushing myself outside my comfort zone and doing something that I certainly wasn't. When you sent that first message to me and I said, look, I want to reach out to this particular person. I know they've gone for an exit. How do I do this? And your message got the response. And I'm not too sure that mine would have done, because it would have been too polite, too nice.
I think that comes from the experience of me doing outbound for sales, but also for growing the podcast, interestingly enough. But anything that we did is we had a framework that we knew has a good success rate, that allows you to follow up, that allows you to be polite, but it's also firm enough. And then we put in your personality and your energy, Jay, and your skill set, so that when you send it, it feels authentically you, but it's a framework from somebody you've borrowed from. But then that for me has been really helpful. That strand of having frameworks that I know can work, but then letting somebody put their own personal spin on it over and over and over again. So that second part was really important. So my skill set in sales, the ability to coach and actually teach things is really important. The mark of a charlatan is somebody that makes something simple sound complicated. The mark of an expert is somebody that makes something complicated sound simple, or at least actionable. And I think sales falls into that bracket. And the third, which makes it a fiscally viable business, is that it's valuable. Because if you start closing more clients, Jay, you're not going to grumble about the fee you pay me. In the same way, when I go into a business, recently, last month, we were in a business of kitchen designers that do luxury bespoke German kitchens. My workshop fee is a fraction of the cost of one of their kitchens, and their designers are now getting better at closing the showroom visits that come in, and they're getting better at booking meetings with architects and construction businesses who are reviewing who their agreed partner is for the kitchens that they're building en masse. That's pretty exciting. So skill set, ability to communicate and teach, but also the fact that it is fiscally viable, because people do put a value on it. Whereas perhaps if you sold another service, another product, or you coached in another arena, it wouldn't be as fiscally viable for you to go all in, or at least for me to go all in.
But it isn't a guaranteed, fiscally sensible decision, because you are making an investment in yourself and you don't know what the outcome will be. But you have to trust the process. You also have to trust, I guess for you, it's the background that you've created. You're online, people know how you speak, people know about your sales career because you've spoken about it on the podcast, and now hopefully you've got testimonials as well where people are talking about the success that they've had, and you're speaking to more people. So you have to take a leap of faith if you're doing this. But for me, it's not a skill that comes naturally. I feel like I'm somebody who is very good at communicating with people, but maybe not necessarily good at the, in inverted commas, sales. But what you're doing is you're helping people to essentially gain the confidence to actually to do it in a non-salesy way.
Our first module was on sales mindset, wasn't it? And that was really just reframing that you have a real value to bring. And a phrase that I like is, if not you, then who? So for example, if there's a particular client out there that's had an exit from a business and you know you would do a fantastic job for them, Jay, on managing their money in the future, making sure it's tax efficient, making sure it serves their family, protects them potentially from hazardous taxes like this Labour government are trying to steal from you. If you know you would do a good job on that, it is your duty, both morally and for yourself, to get in front of that client and make sure that they know you're offering. Now, people will be selling lots of different things. If you're selling kitchens, bathrooms, boilers, if you're selling an education course, if you're selling insert gym equipment, loads of different businesses I've worked with. So if you're selling podcast studio rental, you can't get as like moral about it, but you should know that you have a really good service and product, and you should have a confidence that I need to get in front of these people and make sure they know about what I do, and I can match their needs and desires to a product and service and delivery that I can fulfill on.
Going back to that word value from earlier on, understanding your value, the value that you give to other people who are your clients.
Yeah, and that was something we did. So we talked a lot about the afters concept. What does a client experience after they work with you? And if a business can't clearly articulate that, they've got a serious problem. And businesses always go to the opposite of that. They talk about themselves in their past, not their client in their future. And that was something I learned from a guy called Andy Bounds, who was a phenomenal sales trainer. I think he's still in the game, so I'm not speaking about him posthumously. But he speaks about the afters concept. And that is so important that we get a really clear articulation that people don't want a gardener, they want a clean aesthetic garden. People don't want a newspaper, they want the news. People don't want a lawyer, they want to stay out of jail or pay a reduced fine. People don't want a sales coach, they want a better structure to their sales process, increase revenue and increase profit. People don't want a financial advisor, they want their money to be safe for them and their family to live a good life now and into the future. If you cannot distill your service or your business down into that, you've got a real problem, especially what's coming down the line with the AI age, because it's going to wipe you out if you're not able to communicate clearly with your clients and make them understand why they want to deal with a human.
Who's your most suitable person to come to you, potential client?
I think there's three primarily customer groups. There's an aspirational professional, somebody like yourself, Jay. So you know that you've got value, you've got a skill set. Perhaps you know that your sales process either isn't structured enough, or you think there's maybe some holes in the bucket as somebody works their way through the funnel from cold through to client. There's a business owner that is either a solopreneur or he's got a couple of people working within the business, and perhaps he's good at sales or he's quite good at sales, but he's so busy and he's not quite sure how to build a structure, how to systematize things, how to be more efficient as he's growing. And then the last one is somebody that runs a sales team of, 6 to 10 people. I've not worked with any teams larger than that at this stage. So I think those three guys, or those three demographics, they all have very similar needs in terms of structure, frameworks, processes, a little bit on sales mindset, and then what I would call some of the sales surgery stuff that I do, which some of the latter sessions that we did where you came to me and you're like, I've been implementing this and this is working really well. I'm working on this particular client. Let's write the 3 whys together, or let's write my follow-up together. Or if I have the discovery meeting, what do you think I should send them in advance, or what should I do? Stuff that wasn't like totally set out for you in advance. We were working on as a more ad hoc basis.
But even just on that for a second, I'm just sort of like disclosing a little bit of the information that we've spoken about. But I came to you and I said, the sales stuff is fantastic, but I also want to work on the podcast for a second. So, for example, I want to improve my outbound process to make sure that I can get, bigger and better guests on, and improve my follow-up process, for example. And again, that's something that, from your experience, we've just been able to tailor and, basically put templates together and work on.
Yeah, that follow-up to a podcast is like a follow-up to a meeting. And I've got a phrase that I use: your meeting's only as good as your follow-up. Because I've come out of so many different sales meetings, and I've come out of many podcasts as well, where you're excited, elated about how it went, and you think you've either got the deal or that guest is going to be incredible and they're going to share it on their massive audience. It's going to help the show grow, which is an important lever to pull on with podcasts. Let's not lie. But if you don't follow up concisely and clearly with the 2Ds, who's doing what and what the deadline is for that, then you leave yourself in a little bit of a situation where you haven't controlled as much as you can. And I'm a big believer, let's increase the surface area of luck, that we're going to get lucky with the work that we do. And we do that through clear communication, clear actions, a clear agenda for what's going to take place after the meeting. And if we go into your podcast example, following up on the day of release to make sure that the guest has all the assets they need to share it on their socials and to push it to their audience, making sure they're happy with the clips that we want to collaborate with them on social media, even letting them potentially pick a timestamp that they want to produce content from that off the back of it, asking them if they know any other guests that might be good fit for your show, because again, that's how I've been introduced to some of the guys. So for example, Daniel Priestley introduced me to an entrepreneur, which was amazing. And Daniel gets that feeling of being like, oh, I introduced Colin to somebody, I helped his show, and I helped the guy that I introduced Colin to because he got on to go to Colin's show and promote himself. That's great. And equally, we know from your perspective as a wealth manager, financial advisor, your guests are potential people that could work with you down the line should they go through an exit or should their financial situation dictate that they would want to have that level of financial advice and support. So positioning yourself was really important, that you're not just Jay the podcast host. In fact, that's just something you're doing on the side at the moment. You have this huge expertise and value you can bring. And so when we built that structure for you, we wanted to tick all those boxes, promote the podcast, position Jay as an expert, ensure that they're able to introduce you to somebody either as a client or a potential future podcast guest. And when we have that structure, it's so repeatable that you know what good looks like. And I think that's one of the big problems we have in sales or any form of communication. If we don't know what to aim for, let's make sure we know what to aim away from. Hell, but let's have a standard we hold ourselves to that's pretty repeatable. And I think we've got that now.
Do you think that from your experience working with salespeople, that people are just lacking that follow-up part? Because I'm going to use an example here. And I did a presentation recently to a group of lawyers at Cambridge University, which was amazing. And they were sort of all on the upwards trajectory in their careers. And I was being asked about business development and about how do you network efficiently and successfully. And I think we've all been in a situation before where we have met somebody that we believe are a potential contact, friend, or client for us. We walk away from that meeting or interaction and we say, that was amazing, and you feel really good. How many people then walk away and do something with that? And my point to them was the follow-up is the most important thing. The meeting actually is the hardest part. The follow-up is the easier part, but how many people fall down on the follow-up? But as you say, having a repeatable process, having something that you can just go to, whether it's a LinkedIn message afterwards to say, good to meet you last night, we'd love to grab a coffee with you, or if it's a more structured email, something that you can just pull out the drawer and literally just like slap it on, change the name, send it as a first point of contact that just re-engages that conversation and takes it one step further. But do you find that some salespeople or people that are business owners, businessmen, whatever, just don't have that repeatable process afterwards?
It's structure, isn't it, Jay? And you were saying there, pull out the drawer. It's in our Apple Notes, isn't it? And we've got them for outbound, for the podcast, and for your day job.
Yeah.
We've got the follow-up for the podcast, and we've got the follow-up for your meetings for your day job as well. And guess what? Within the body of that text, there's obviously different areas that we bespoke for that person about their company, something they've told you on a personal level, which we keep in some sort of personal CRM, which I'm a big fan of. For those that don't know, that's customer relationship management. And that's just data you have about the person you're speaking to, whether it is they support Arsenal or they've got 2 kids or they just went on holiday to the Maldives, whatever it is, have that. When we have that drawer or that Apple Note to pull from, we stack the deck in our favour. We increase that surface area of luck, meaning that, oh, that was really good to hear from Jay off the back of that. You keep the momentum going because the meeting is the peak of the momentum. The follow-up is maintaining that momentum so we get towards the deal or the next meeting or whatever it is that we hope to get from the encounter or the relationship. So yeah, I would totally agree. I think it's a massive lack of structure. Hormozy says that 20 minutes of preparation makes you look like a genius sometimes. I think 1 hour of writing some template follow-ups or some template outbounds, and of course, bespoking them as time goes, would save people so much time and energy and would help them be far more consistent in their business development or at least their relationship management.
What do you think about people using AI now to help them to create those templates?
In particular, ChatGPT, which I do use, is only as good as the prompts you put into it. So for example, I'm working with a guy called Andy Crammond, works in the property space. He's doing some fantastic work, but he was desperate again for structure. He was saying to me, he's like, what does good look like across a week for my outbound? Because at the moment I'm pretty much full. I'm working on a lot of projects, but I know that come Q4, that's going to drop. I need to fill up the pipeline. So we were talking and he was saying, what can I feed into AI to try and save some time? And I was like, we can 100% save time, But what we're going to feed it is we're going to feed it the afters concept, your ideal client profile. We're going to feed it the 3 whys structure and the follow-up facilitator at the end. We won't tell anyone on the podcast what that is because that's a game changer. They have to work with me to find out what that. We're going to feed that into AI and we're going to use that to prompt. And then you call it, it's almost like the Michelangelo effect. You get this kind of hunk of marble from the AI, and then we use our chisel to chip away it till we build the statue and make it look how we want it. So it's only as good as what you feed it. Feed it prompts and frameworks and concepts that you've either learned from somebody like myself or whoever else you're learning from online, and then refine it thereafter. And definitely remove the double dash thing it does.
Dash, yeah.
That is a surefire way. If somebody sends me a LinkedIn message with a double dash,
Delete.
I'm not reading it.
Yeah.
If he sends me an email with a double dash, it's fucking gone.
If I see a LinkedIn post and I see it, just scroll on. It's not come from you.
It's lazy. So AI is going to make things much more efficient. We can maybe talk about some of the other tools that I think are helpful for sales guys or people that are looking to increase their revenue and their sales. But use it in the right way. Feed it the right stuff that's not come from it. Get it from a source that's separate. A coach, a consultant, a mentor figure. Maybe within your company you've got some guidelines or some structures that you can follow. And then chisel down what it spits out so that you end up in a better spot.
Let's talk about the AI tools that you use.
ChatGPT for that. So for example, I was bouncing it ideas around for Andy's different ideal clients and thinking about, based on this, what was the case? And based on this, what would they be interested in hearing about as a YU, which is the first in the 3 whys for the outbound message. So that was helpful. Fathom AI is a meeting minute taker. So that sits in on my Google Meets or my Zoom calls for my discovery meetings. And a discovery meeting, for those that are not familiar, is just that first meeting with you and a potential client to understand what are they interested in, what do they care about, what are their requirements, what are their needs, what are their pain points, what are their problems, and then we position our solution. So that takes great meeting minutes, and that enables us to send a really good follow-up. It also records the meeting, and that's something that I use with my guys when we're critiquing their delivery, their clarity of speech, and the quality of their questions they ask in discovery. So Fathom, or the other option is Fireflies, has two strands to it. Helps your follow-up, and it also allows you to go back and critique and watch it as game tape and be like, how did I open that meeting? How did I carry myself? Did I use my Let's questions, again, one of the frameworks that I teach? Did I use the 2Ds at the end to assign my follow-up and know what the clear actions were off the back of it? So Fathom AI, ChatGPT, Gamma.app. If you search Gamma AI, there's like loads of different competitors that are like paying for the SEO to try and overtake it. But Gamma.app is amazing for presentations. So I was a Canva man, but I was also outsourcing elements of that, so my slides look good. Whereas now I use Gamma. There's a few different elements to it, but it allows me to basically write all my notes in order of my slides, all the different things, and then it'll format into different tables, different graphics. It'll put images in and you can play around with it, but we're talking producing, like my presentation for Pure Sport yesterday was on negotiation. I wrote now the presentation takes time to write because you're writing the content. That you cannot ever escape that. You do the work. Fucking put your big boy pants on and do the work. But actually making the slides, it spat out a version of it within 40 seconds. And then I changed around some of the tables, again, minor changes, and the images within it within 25 minutes. Previously, a presentation that was 10 slides that I was delivering for an hour, we're talking hours, or a big fee to pay somebody on Fiverr or Upwork.
I mean, how many people are paying like marketing agencies to do all this sort of stuff for them? And we literally sat there and you had your bullet point notes, and you invested a lot of time into preparing those. The moment you had those notes, you put it into to Gamma, and then press auto generate. And if you're like me, who's not a very creative person, all the little icons that come up, and like
were great, weren't they?
The graphics, the little circles, all the stuff that you wouldn't think about using, professionalizes your pitch deck so much more, and then it gives you the basis to then build something tailored to what you're looking to do.
The last AI tool, I'm not going to tell you what it's called, but we use it to do research on prospects before we meet them.
Okay.
So one of the most important things before you meet a prospect is do some sort of homework, so you know something they've worked on previously. So your opening question on the call after, how are you, is not about the weather. You can ask about, I saw this on your LinkedIn, or I saw this on your website, or I saw this on the local newspaper or the national newspaper. That AI tool allows you to have a little bit of a CRM on them before we've met them. Now, you can do your own research, and I strongly encourage you do. You go on their LinkedIn, you go on their Instagram, you go on their company website. But this tool is a way that you can prompt that. And this actually came from a friend of mine, my brother, who works in the insurance industry, and he saw what they were using. Now, the tool that we're using is different, but it does the same thing. Because when you go in, you want to impress somebody that you've shown the respect to meet them. One of the reasons my podcast has done so well is because so many of my guests are like, whoa, I didn't know you would know that. And when somebody has that level of acknowledgement at the start of the meeting, they will open up more to you about other challenges because they're going to tell you stuff beyond the surface level. They know you know the surface level. Miles Usher Doyle, I spoke to the other day, he told a story right at the very start, and I said, oh, interesting, Miles, when I've heard you tell that story before when I was doing my research, you mentioned that you did musical theatre at university. And he was like, oh, I'm glad you know that. Let's get into it. And he would go deeper on that part of his story with me because I've done the entry-level stuff. So we can use a tool that allows us to do that to our prospects at the start of a meeting about their company, their business, or the trajectory they're on.
You mentioned there about when you first speak to somebody, how much cold sales outreach do you do?
For the sales coaching business, I've only done a tiny bit because my personal brand and network through the podcast and the different networking events I've been at. So I've spoken at a golf day recently. I've spoken at a number of property masterminds. I actually work with a lot of guys in the property space because it's such a competitive industry. And these guys are all really good at finding the deals that are off market or finding investment opportunities, but they don't have a structured process for onboarding investors. So it was like shooting fish in a barrel, really. These guys, they're so good at what they do in terms of their service, but they just needed those structure, and they can make a lot of money as well. So they're more than happy to pay a sizable fee for coaching as well, which is win-win for both of us.
Out of the business.
Yeah, true.
Top line,
right
off.
Yeah, which is again a good demographic. But yeah, I think when it comes to like client acquisition, I've done a couple of bits of outreach in the last week in particular. We spoke about one where I'm going to be speaking at an event in London now off the back of meeting somebody who's very influential in the financial advisory space. I'm going to appear in a couple of podcasts in that space as well, which will be really exciting. I'm looking forward to connecting with those guys. And again, that was literally the 3 Ys, message on email. I combo prospected him, which is none of my concept. So he got hit with an email, and then the same day got hit with a LinkedIn voice note after we connected. So he knew to check his inbox from the email address that I told him. We had a discovery call where I asked Let's questions. We followed up with the 2 Ds, and one of the Ds is do, and the second D is deadline. And he introduced me to a forum of 35 financial advisors that I'm speaking at in November. So I followed my process. I practice what I preach. But in terms of cold outreach for the sales business just now in the coaching business, I haven't had to do a lot because of what I've been building for the last 5 years. Podcast, LinkedIn, Instagram. So the inbound inquiry has been there.
Do you think that he realized that he was being hit with all of these different methods? As somebody who is a financial advisor and probably has
he's very skilled at sales as well.
Yeah.
Really impressive. And the team so interestingly, we're going to do some work with this team in Q1, but he is one of the few firms, I think, we won't name them just now, but he's one of the few firms that I think is coaching advisors to not just be technical. And we were joking that, and maybe any of your financial advisor friends listening to this will laugh, the industry was so sales over technical, 80s, 90s, like basically Del Boys, snake oil salesman. It flipped to new advisors coming through like yourself that were focused on technical, less on sales. So you had to invest in sales with somebody like me and the podcast you listen to and the content you consume. And he was saying that younger generation coming through, there's a real black spot for that. And I found that as well because one of my other clients is an IFA too, who again, when he left his rugby career, focused massively on the technical and then realised in order for me to grow my book, I need to really make sure that I do my sales and communication skills. And now
which is fantastic, by the way, because if you've got that baseline level of really strong technical ability, you can impress people. It's then about how do you get in the room with those people? How do you get them to engage with you? How do you actually know that you exist? Because once they know you exist and once you're talking to them, that level of technical ability comes through and they're like, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. I really like this person. They're not just a person who can do good sales outreach. They're also a person that knows their stuff.
Do I think that particular gentleman knew that I was putting him through some sort of sales process? He knew that we had mutual benefit to give to each other, because again, he can come on my podcast, which is a value add. I can go on his podcast, so I bring my audience across while producing good content that he can release in his weekly, or I think they're fortnightly, their upload schedule. So he definitely knew there was something I was looking to gain from it, but he knew that I was giving value as well. I think in any email exchange or any initial message, you want a position that you're going to generate some sort of value. It's not just let's have a chat, because people are too busy to just have a chat, or at least they fucking should be.
Can you give me an example, for example, of how I would communicate giving value to somebody in that first message?
In that early part of the message, we want to notice something about their business or their trajectory and mention something that we've done for a similar client that might help them as well, whether it's about inheritance tax, whether it's about pension structure, whether it's about being tax efficient for an exit. Mentioning something like that is dangling the carrot that you have some information that their IFA, or if they're not working with somebody just now, somebody should be speaking to them about. And it's often that sort of shock that somebody who's come in cold has noticed this and is pointing it out to you. When your current advisor or you yourself should be considering it, you gain a lot of respect that, oh, this guy who doesn't even work with me right now has mentioned something that might be helpful for me, and you give a little bit of free value or information that positions you as a trusted advisor in your space, whether you're actually giving advice or not. Again, it depends on who's talking, but for you, Jay, it's mentioning something that you think would be helpful or valuable to them that can only come from somebody with a level of expertise from your sector.
So if somebody does want to work with you, what's like the process, for example? What do you do a discovery call first of all? Like, how do they reach out to you?
At the moment, the offering's expanding very, very soon. So there's going to be a number of really entry-level products that will support people, like some templates and stuff on my email list. There's going to be a video course which enables people to get 4 or 5 hours of walking you through all the different lessons I've learned over the last 14 years of B2C and B2B sales. That will be plug and play. They'll be able to watch the content. There'll be templates from download and use. And then, of course, there's going to be one-to-one for either individuals or for workshops, which are either delivered online or in person. Initially, some of those entry-level products will just be click and collect and cart. They can serve service, but the vast majority, I like to have a discovery call to understand what somebody's needs and requirements are, and then build whatever it is around them off the back of it. It's been so exciting. January, September, I'm pretty much fully booked. It's been absolutely crazy, because when I turned the gas taps on, in terms of I'm now doing this full time, the inquiry level was far higher, because they know they can fit in within hours. Because you and I were kind of skirting around diaries to make our 6 calls happen. Same for all the guys I was working with in the last few months.
But it's also, this also means that it's not just for your diary, but it's also for my diary. You've got a lot more availability around my work schedule as well, because you're not fitting it into your working hour. You're outside of your working hours.
Jay, you're so right. And so, yeah, I think discovery call is so important. I've got a phrase that many of the listeners will like. Prescription without diagnosis is medical malpractice. For example, Jay, you walk into the GP tomorrow, you sit down your bum down in the chair, he says, Jay, thanks for coming in. I want you to take 3 of these 3 times a day for the next 3 weeks. Here's your prescription, go see the pharmacist. You would look at it and be like, I've not told him anything, and these are for headaches. I'm actually having a problem with my knee. That is the same for an awful lot of sales transactions. So if you as a business have a solution that you just push onto a client before you've even understood their needs or requirements, you're going to really fall down. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that approach. So anyone that speaks to me, we focus really clearly on what their area of development is, and then we assign the package based on that. Yesterday's workshop at Pure Sport was with their ambassador team for negotiation with brand ambassadors they're working with, agents who have athletes that they're working with, event spaces that they're renting out or collabing with, and community groups like run clubs or gyms that they're selling into their electrolytes and some of the other products. If I had had a conversation with Pure Sport where I said, I'm going to help you with outreach, discovery meetings and closing, they would have said, Colin, that's not the need and requirement for our team. That would have been prescription without diagnosis, because that's typically what I coach around. But of course I can coach around negotiation, positioning value, follow-up, using social proof and testimonials to get something over the line to convince somebody that it's something they want to do. So when you consider how you run your process and how I'm going to run my process, it's all about understanding need and then matching to that what we're going to deliver in terms of service.
You need to be asking more questions in those discovery meetings than you do giving them information.
2 years, one mouth. Avoid show up and throw up's another one we spoke about, isn't it? And there's one of the guys, I won't mention who it is because he jokes that he goes motor mouth in some of his discovery meetings where he just doesn't stop talking. And it's very common. And he has a sticker on his laptop screen that says 2 years, one mouth. And then on the other side says avoid show up and throw up. And one of the tools we use for that is one called back channeling. And that's just a verbal and non-verbal way of encouraging the person you've asked the question to keep going. So you're doing it just now, Jay. You're nodding at me to encourage me to keep speaking. If it's not on a podcast, you can, yeah, okay, good. That would sound terrible on a podcast. You can use your facial expressions. So if somebody says something terrible, so if Jay says to me, I just lost a massive deal last month. I really don't know what I did right, what I did wrong. I could grimace or go, ooh. And that's me not coming charging back in with a solution to say, I can help you win those deals in the future, which I think I can. I instead go, oh. And if you don't say anything else, I'll say, oh, what happened? Or what went wrong? I get to dig deeper. I probe a little bit more so somebody tells more. So we avoid show up and throw up. We avoid talking too much. We avoid going motor mouth mode. And instead, we back channel to get more and more and more so that the person who we are prospecting or looking to work with tells us more about their situation, their problems, their goals, their aspirations, and puts us in a better position to work with them.
Just before we finish up, you've also spoken about this on your podcast before. You've had some amazing guests on as well who have been great sales coaches and these sorts of things. Are there any episodes that stick out, including yours, that you'd like to refer people to if they haven't listened to them?
Yeah, I think for more on my sales career and the big revenue that I did over the last 2 years, which was 2.8 million ex VAT, there's episode 257 and there's episode 319. 319 was actually recorded in this lovely studio.
Nice.
Okay, just after the event that we had down by the river with Andrew Craig.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I came across here and recorded it that day. So those two. I've had Andy Bounds on the podcast who taught me the afters concept, for which I'm eternally grateful. And that was a bit of a pinch me moment. I think that's episode 1112. And that was one of those moments where I consumed so much of a guy's content and learned so much and applied it within my day job to then have Andy on the podcast, albeit it was 2 years after I initially asked him. The fortune is in the follow-up. People remember when you first get a no, reapproach with something new down the line when circumstances change. The circumstances that changed, basically, I'd grown a big audience. So he was like, yeah, of course, I'll come on your podcast. So Andy Bounce.
Was it awkward at all when you did that? Like, were there like, were the same messages still above, or are you just literally following up and being like,
the same messages are still above?
Yeah.
The circumstances have changed. One of the great ways to get a response from a dead lead or a lead that's gone cold is mention something new. So I could say to you, for example, Jay, let's say you didn't go ahead with sales coach from me. I could message you in 2 months' time and be like, Jay, hope your sales have been great since we last spoke. Are there any particular areas you're looking for support with? I've got some new ways of working with me that might be more in line with your requirements. What's your diary like next Tuesday at 2 or 3, next Wednesday at 3 or 4 for us to have a chat? And then I would put in an FUF. We won't tell anyone an FUF is on this call because you know what they are, right? Speak soon. Now, the intrigue for you about there's some new ways of working with me or some new ways that might be more better fitted for you. You're thinking, okay, I'll have a chat with Cole. And then you've got options for when you pick to speak to me as well. That's the why now bit. You know exactly when you can book in.
And finally, how do people actually reach out to you or find the way to contact you about your sales service?
Email address is colin@cambro.com. The podcast is Cambro Conversations, wherever you're listening to this brilliant conversation. And you can get me on LinkedIn, Colin T. Campbell, or if you're a younger chap and you're on Instagram, it's call.cambro.
Awesome. Thanks so much for episode 2. And yeah, hopefully it's exciting to see you actually do well from this. When we spoke about the news when it dropped, I think you might be staying at my house at the time and you were like, I think this is going to go this way. But you've just dived in and, you've not looked phased at any point, which is amazing to see. And I messaged you and said, are you nervous about this? And you're like, a little bit, but I'm excited, which is good. And it's the right approach.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to you, Jay, for being a really supportive friend during this period and another voice that I would listen to during it in terms of your energy was really positive and encouraging. And we haven't spoken about this too much. I'm going to do a solo episode on my podcast about this. But when you're going through a challenging situation like a redundancy, a breakup, a bereavement, insert whatever traumatic or challenging event it is, you need to be so selective of who you invest your time and your energy with in terms of conversations. And you were one of those people, because I knew you had high level of expectation for how I was going to conduct myself, high level of expectation for what I was going to go on to achieve, and you would hold me to those standards rather than being like, it's okay, mate. Yeah, don't worry. Like, go and get another job. Like, just go and do your thing. You were like, it makes total sense for you to go all in. Go and do it. You can do this.
And I've also worked with you, so I know the results. I know how it looks. So I'm an advocate, and yeah, I can see that you should be spending more time doing this for yourself. And I also want to see you, benefiting from the flexibility that you've worked towards over those years.
Yeah, spot on, Jay. Thank you so much for having me, mate.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you very much.